What's up, guys? Welcome to the Young Guns podcast. It's that time of the year again where we're going to be talking about our award prediction videos. So, with the first one, of course, and with the Young Guns, no pun intended, we're going to be starting with the Calder Trophy candidates video. But before we get into that, we're just going to have a quick word for our sponsor, which is Bet99. So if you like fantasy hockey, football, or other casino games, sign up to Bet99 right now. In the link, there's a description below, and you can use our code YoungGuns1. You must be 19 years old and up to play, and you have to play responsibly. And also, our other sponsor, the Mind Foundation Canada, they raise funds and awareness to find cures for neurological disease and disorders. So they're currently focused on mental health. So if you want to donate, please click on the link in the description below. So with that being said, let's talk about some Young Guns hockey. And our first video, essentially, we covered the 2022 Calder candidates. So now it's come a full circle, and now we're back out doing it for our second time, year two of the Young Guns podcast. So with that being said as well, let's get into it. We're going to be talking about two rookies that could be legit candidates, and that is going to be Matthew Beniers, or Matty Beniers, whatever you want to call him, and Shane Wright, two centers that were drafted in the top 10 the past previous years in their respective draft years.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, this going to be fascinating to watch, especially if you're a Seattle Kraken fan. You've got yourself Shane Wright, who you drafted fourth overall, and Matty Beniers, who is a really good player that you drafted second overall in 2021. And what's interesting with Matty Beniers is, this is going to be a season for him to kind of take over. We saw what he was capable of doing last year when he joined Seattle. He had 9 points in 10 games. And there was a lot of promise about this kid coming in and potentially changing the dynamic. And I think he's going to be Seattle's number one center. I don't think there's any question about that. I think he plays top line minutes. He was fantastic with the University of Michigan last year. He had 43 points in 37 games. This is a guy that is going to take this league by storm. And I think that he's a guy that is really, really in the Calder watch for sure. We saw what he was capable of doing last year with Seattle. The interesting one for me is not necessarily Matty Beniers, but it's more of Shane Wright, because Shane Wright, there's no guarantees he plays on the NHL team this season. Obviously, the expectation is he will be. The expectation is that he likely starts the season with Seattle, but there's been talks about how he's not NHL ready yet and that he may need one more year in the OHL. So if Shane Wright doesn't play, then he's basically out of the Calder conversation anyways. But if he does play, I'm curious to see how many points he gets and kind of where he fits that. Because I think Beniers goes first line center. So I would assume Shane Wright would probably take second or third line center duties and power play minutes as well. So those two guys, to me, are really standout candidates for the Calder, especially for Seattle. And I think if you're a Seattle fan, you're super, super excited because those are two guys that are absolutely going to be, really good players. So
And not only that, everyone had him as the consensus first overall pick, which he ends up dropping down to Seattle. So now they have a first line centerman and a second line centerman that could
yeah,
become interchangeable.
yeah,
Beniers, sorry, he had 9 points in 10 games last year. He had an impact immediately when he joined the team. And for Shane Wright, he's on this tour of like revenge, essentially, or vengeance, whatever you want to call it, essentially, because three teams passed up on him. So, and he, in his mind, he thought he was going to be the first overall pick. People could say that he was maybe cocky or whatever you want to call him, but he has to prove to the hockey world that he was the best guy available, and everyone else that passed up on him made a mistake. So, you have Alexander Wenberg, you have Yanni Gord and Morgan Geekie as center depth. I do see Shane Wright, potentially playing second line minutes, if not third. I do think he does make the NHL right away, even though there's a lot of people saying that, he needed to develop a little bit more because, COVID kind of like, uh, lessened the amount of games he could have played. So it kind of hurt his progress in terms of, becoming a more developed player. And that's why he wasn't as good this past year in terms of his rookie numbers. But, I still think he's going to develop into a great player. And now Seattle have two pivotal players moving forward that essentially could become, franchise players for them, especially that this is their second year in the league. But again, I do think Beniers will be better than Shane Wright, but we'll see what happens. They have two solid candidates there. And let's move on to the next one, Luca.
Well, the next one that I kind of want to talk about is, well, I mean, we can kind of go with anyone, but one guy that I really want to talk about is going to be Kent Johnson. Now, Kent Johnson obviously played. He played in the World Juniors this year. He played in the World Championships. Kent Johnson's been playing hockey all summer, and this is a kid that is very, very high on the Jackets' radar. As you know, they already have Cole Sillinger over there in Columbus, and they added Johnny Gaudreau this offseason as well. I think Kent Johnson is going to take the next step with Columbus. And look, another guy that played for the University of Michigan last year, 37 points in 32 games. He was fantastic for them as well. But he played well at every level that he was at this season. He came to the NHL, he had 3 points in 9 games. Probably not the best, but I don't think he was necessarily ready for it when he came in and played those 9 games. But at the Olympics, he had 5 points at the Olympics. He had 7 points in 10 games at the World Championships. And he had 9 points in 7 games at the World Juniors. This is a kid that's taken the next step to becoming that, elite talented player that he's supposed to be. And I think on a Columbus team, with the likes of Patrick Laine, with the likes of Johnny Gaudreau, Cole Sillinger being added as well over there, and obviously guys like Jack Roslovic as well. This is a team that offensively are going to be very, very gifted. And if they add a guy, if Kent Johnson could come in and, kind of put up the same numbers or similar numbers to what he was doing, at the Olympics and at the World Championships, then Columbus are really going to get themselves a solid player here. So I think Kent Johnson's a guy that is definitely one to watch this season in terms of Calder votes, because I think, he's very skilled. We all know what he's capable of doing. We saw those highlight reel goals that he scored at the World Juniors and even just the plays that he made at the Olympics as well. So I think this is a guy that he's flashy, but at the same time, he's got a lot of talent. And I think if he's used in the right position on the power play, and played with elite skilled guys as well, this is a guy that could really, really challenge for that Calder this year.
And in terms of Ken Johnson, where we could see him potentially playing in the lineup, I'd see him, being on a line with the rest of the young kids, Cole Sillinger and Kirill Marchenko as well, playing, third line minutes. There's obviously an opportunity for Ken Johnson to move up to the second line, surpassing Gustav Nyquist or maybe Jakub Voracek. But he's not going to surpass Johnny Gaudreau and Patrick Laine unless there's injuries. So I do see him playing some power play minutes, but I do see him being a second or third line player in this upcoming season. So let's move on to our next candidate, guys.
Well, I think we're gonna, before we move on to the two big names that I think everybody wants to hear, we're gonna move on to some defensemen first. Just some notable defensemen on the list. We're not gonna go in depth on all of them, but obviously Owen Power is a guy that's going to be interesting to watch. Simon Nemec, who was drafted by New Jersey this season, is another one to watch. And then there's two kind of under the radar guys in Jake Sanderson and Simon Edvinsson from Ottawa and Detroit, respectively. These are defensemen that are going to be very interesting to watch. Do I think Edvinsson reaches the level that he needs to get to the Calder? I don't know. But mind you, Moritz Seider won the Calder last year, so anything's possible at this point. And with Detroit, they have a really good development staff over there, so it wouldn't surprise me. I think when you look at the defensemen that are probably in the running, I think Owen Power and Simon Nemec are the top two on that list. Nemec is going to take over New Jersey's power play. I think that's pretty clear and obvious. I think he steps into the team, he takes power play one, he's on the point, he's going to get himself as many assists as he possibly can this season. So he's a guy that's going to play a big role for the Devils, I believe. But Owen Power, too. I mean, this is a guy that's playing on a Buffalo team that's really improved, on a team that I think could surprise a lot of people this season. And look, we know what he's capable of doing. Owen Power is one of the best defensemen, I think, coming out of college that we've seen in a long time. This is a guy that's going to be fantastic. And look, he played really, really well for Buffalo last year when he came in those last couple of games of the season. And I think this year, if he's used on the power play, kind of with Dahlin, maybe they go two defensemen on that power play. I could definitely see Owen Power reaching 45 points. I know that's maybe a bit high, but I think he's definitely capable of doing it. And kind of the same thing with Nemec. I think 45, 50, if all goes well, and he develops into the player that he's supposed to be.
Look, Edvinsson for Detroit is going to be a fantastic top four defenseman for years to come, but he will not have the same impact that Moritz Seider had. So I don't think he's necessarily going to win the Norris or even be a top three candidate. But in terms of the other defensemen you mentioned, Owen Power will be playing on the second pairing. I see Matthias Samuelsson being paired up with Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power being paired up with Lubushkin on the second defensive pairing. But there's also Jack Quinn that has a possibility of making the team as well, and that makes him eligible also for
For the
the
Calder.
Calder Trophy as well. So those are two Buffalo guys once again to look out for. So you have two guys to look out for in Seattle, two guys to look out for in Buffalo. So that's fantastic. Where there's multiple candidates playing for the same team. In terms of Nemec, there's a logjam in terms of defense. They're gonna have to get rid of somebody on their defensive core because as of right now, I do feel that there's too many defensemen. And right now, your Ryan Graves, Doug Hamilton, uh, Damon Severson, Brendan Smith, John Marino. There's two. I could go on and on with these defensemen, right? So someone has to move. It's either going to be Ryan Graves or Damon Severson that moves. If there's
Yeah.
someone that has to be moved to make room for Simon Nemec, but also there's a guy in Luke Hughes who could potentially join the team at the end of his of the season once his college season is done too. Will he necessarily be a candidate this year? No, but that's someone to look out for the following year in 2024.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is you've got this situation where I think there's a lot of players that are going to be very very interesting this season. For me, Jake Sanderson in Ottawa, I'm not so sure because I think he's going to miss the start of the year actually with an injury, so I'm not so sure
Well,
about him.
you know what? I think Sanderson, where he starts off, is obviously going to be in the top four. I do see Thomas Chabot and Travis Hamonic being a pairing, and I do see Jake Sanderson being a pairing with Artem Zub. But there's also Eric Brandstrom, who hasn't really found this game yet with the Ottawa Senators, but has a lot of upside. So we don't know if Brandstrom automatically passes Sanderson in the depth chart, or does Sanderson play automatic for a top 4 minutes. So that has yet to be seen.
Yeah,
So depending where he plays and the role he's given, that's going to determine whether or not he's a Calder candidate.
I want to get into the two big names, and I think everybody wants to get into the two big names or the most talked about. I would say this going into this season, and that's Uri Slafkovsky and obviously Mason McTavish. For me, I like Slafkovsky. I think I grew on that draft pick when the Canadians drafted him. I look at where the Canadians are at forward wise, and I don't know if Slafkovsky starts the year in Montreal. And I know that people are going to be surprised about that, but I get the sense that they don't want to rush Slafkovsky the way they did with Kakanyemi. And so I think that even if he does make the roster, I think they're going to ease him into it. I don't think he's going to be thrown on the first line with Caulfield and Suzuki and being told, hey, you have to get 50 points this season. I think it's going to be a slow progression with Slafkovsky. So that's why I don't necessarily know if he becomes not necessarily a Calder candidate, but I don't know if he gets put in the running because it's all really going to depend on preseason. And I get the impression personally that he's going to have to fight for a role there unless the Canadians, move on from some contracts, which there's been rumors that they're looking into doing. There's too many forwards on that team right now. So unless he stands out and really, lives up to the expectation that he's supposed to, I would not be surprised if he started the year in Laval.
And not
Just to
only
get it
that,
to go.
but if he were to play, I would assume that he's going to be on a top line, which in everyone's predictions of the Montreal Canadiens lineup heading into this upcoming season, he's going to be playing with Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield, which
Yeah.
is going to be the line of the future essentially. So I
I just
mean,
don't I don't think he starts there. I think he starts probably on the third line if he starts. I
yeah.
don't think they
So
I don't think they throw him into the wolves and say, "Hey, you're starting with Suzuki night 1, game 1 against the Leafs." I don't think that happens.
it's always easy and fun to say, hey, you're selected first overall, you're going to be automatically in the Calder running. That's not always the case.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll see what happens there. And in terms of our next pick, which is a favorite to win the Calder,
My
Mason
favorite, yeah.
McTavish.
Oh, I've been high on this guy since he got drafted in Anaheim in 2021, and I said it because I remember we were hanging out together. We were at the casino that night, and I looked at you, and I said Mason McTavish is going to be the best player to come out of his draft class. And the reason I say that is because this kid is fantastic. From everything I've seen and everything I've watched from Mason McTavish, I've been nothing but impressed. And I think that this is a kid that last year came into the NHL, played really, really well for a guy who had 3 points in 9 games, and then went to the OHL, tore it up, was fantastic in the OHL, was fantastic in the OHL playoffs, and then goes to the World Juniors and absolutely tears it apart in the World Juniors. This guy is NHL ready. I think he starts on Anaheim. I think you put him on a line with Trevor Zegras and you let them just
and Troy Terry, and that's the line of the future essentially.
I
So
just
him
let
and
them just let them do it.
Slafkovsky are, predicted to essentially be playing top line minutes with two other pivotal young pieces moving forward. So, I mean, it's kind of, easy to kind of pinpoint, hey, by the way, these two guys are in a position to succeed early on in their career. So, might as well put them in the Calder running, right? Easy
Yeah.
money essentially. And
I
um, the two I would say dark horses, and it really depends where they play, is Marco Rossi and Cole Perfetti. We do know that in terms of the Minnesota Wild, they don't have a bona fide first line center. So can Marco Rossi be that guy from the start? I don't think so. I think they stick with
no.
Ryan Hartman. They have Joel Eriksson Ek as a second
Yeah.
line center. So maybe I would say Rossi plays a third line, fourth
I
line
think
role.
I
So
think kind of like Slafkovsky, Rossi's going to probably have to get an easy transition into the NHL, and they're not going to rush him into it either. I think he's a dark horse if he really breaks out, kind of like what Matt Boldy was when he came in for Minnesota last year. If he does that, I think there's a possibility, but I don't think he gets thrown and says, "Hey, you're playing with Kaprizov night one." I don't think that happens. And in terms of Cole Perfetti, I mean, he's the same kind of situation. He's a guy that came into Winnipeg last year. He struggled at the beginning out of the gate, and then he kind of got better as the season went along. But he took some time in the AHL as well. This is a guy that's going to take a big step this year, especially with the removal of Paul Stastny, and obviously with everything going on with Pierre-Luc Dubois and stuff like that too. I could see Cole Perfetti getting a big role with the Jets, and I think that if he's given that big role, it's going to really, really help them. And I think he's going to be a really big player for them. Calder, I wouldn't give him a Calder vote. At least I think it's too early.
yeah.
I think that the favorite, and I'm just going to say it now, I think the favorite and the guy that's going to win it is McTavish. And I really
I
have
have
no.
another winner actually. It's not McTavish.
I just think McTavish. I'd be very surprised if McTavish didn't win it. Honestly, I would.
I'm
But
going with Beniers on this one.
yeah, that I can agree. I can see that happening too.
He's being thrown essentially in a role where he's gonna have no choice to be a first line center, and if it's not him, it's Shane Wright. But I do think Matty Beniers is more ready than Shane Wright. He's gonna be
Absolutely.
given power play minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if they even give him penalty kill minutes as well. So Seattle's not really necessarily in a position to really win, so they want to just try
No.
it out and see what works and what doesn't. So they have nothing to lose if they get another top 10 draft in 2023. And hey, there's Bedard and Michkov and Fantali available, so why the
And
hell not? So
and just
those are our picks essentially, guys. So we don't know who essentially you guys have as favorites to win the Calder Trophy,
yeah.
but make sure to write that in the comment section below.
And just one last thing before we end it. Just picture a line of Trevor Zegras, Troy Terry, and McTavish to start the year for the Ducks are not making the playoffs. At least I don't think so. But having those three as potentially your top line, oh my man, the Ducks are going to be fun to watch this year. Honestly, they're going to be fun to watch
And a
this year.
lot of these
I'm
rookies that we're
excited.
mentioning, they're on teams that are not expected to be competitive, but it's nice to see because we're gonna be able to see their development, and there's no pressure. And when there's no
No,
pressure, that means things could go off. And with that being
absolutely.
said, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our podcast, and make sure to write who's your Calder winner, at least an early prediction before the season starts. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Young Guns podcast.